Hello again and welcome to a new video about anti-natalism. Now there is one argument that procreationists use in order to excuse themselves to reproduce. Is the argument of I'm gonna try to give the best life to my children. And I think I have already responded that to another video in which I said that even if you try to do that, bad stuff always happen. Accident and unintentional events. The world is filled with bad things, and this is such a good example for that. People still experience the bad, even though their parents intended otherwise. Antinatalism argues that the best life is still bad. And I had a quick chat with ChatGPT in which I have demanded that he gives me a list of counter-arguments in which he tries to persuade me of the opposite. So let's analyze them one by one. Subjective value argument. What constitutes good and bad in life is entirely subjective. So for many people, life is not bad. It's entirely joyous and meaningful and pleasant. Definitely worth living despite the suffering. So I agree that the good and the bad are subjective actually. But what I do not agree is pain and pleasure are not subjective. Having your arm cut off is entirely objectively painful. The death of a loved one, losing a desired property, being diagnosed with cancer, getting sick and dying, those things are objectively painful because we have a system that detects those negative inputs. The nervous system actually detects some type of negativity like that. It detects pain. It's our way to evolve. It's our way to survive. If we couldn't detect pain, we couldn't have reached that far. We need to detect pain. We need to be able to feel pain in order for us to avoid it. So the good and bad are actually subjective, yes, but pain and pleasure are not. So being thrown in a life which actually constitutes a chance in which you will get any of those bad things is actually a bad deal for you, even if you do not exist, but I'm only using language in order for you to understand. It's a bad deal for you if you knew that you would have pleasure, but at the same time you would have also pain. And pain is much more intense than the pleasure because the higher amount of pain always outweighs the higher amount of pleasure. And let's go to the asymmetry argument. For example, if I deprived my unborn son from pleasure, we would have a neutral moral stance. But if I saved him from suffering, we would have a positive moral stance. Therefore, it's better to save your unborn child from suffering because being deprived of pleasure has only a neutral state and doesn't equal to being saved from suffering. So argument number 1 is refuted and the best life is still bad. 2. The hedonistic argument. Best life is filled with more pleasure than pain. If someone experiences mostly pleasure and fulfillment, that is enough to call it good. Then calling that life bad ignores basic value theory. Now I feel that ChatGPT right here has done a mistake of logic. When I say the best life, we need a frame of logic, we need a frame of possibility. I cannot say the best life, which is, for example, a human being who is unable to feel pain. A human being must feel pain. So when I say the best life, we need to frame it in the possibility and in logic, in things that could be, not in things that could not be. So the best life would still have pain. The person with the best life would still live in a body. He is a body, and the body is subject to destruction, subject to negative things happening. Even if you have the best life, you would still age, get sick, and die. Even if you have the best life, your loved ones will still die. You will miss them. Even if you have the best life, you could not guarantee that you will never have an accident. You could never guarantee that something would not go against your will. The person with the best life would be bored to death, having everything, can do everything. After years of doing whatever, having whatever, nothing would be able to fill his void, and you will fall down into this dark emptiness. Because we have not evolved to have everything and being able to do everything. We have evolved to keep chasing. We have evolved to conquer, to dominate. The same process that involves death, destruction, anxiety, depression, whatever you do. Life doesn't seem to have a best option. Whatever you do, you are faced with the darkness of what life offers. So the best life would still include negativity, which is bad for the person that doesn't exist yet even if we knew that we would be able to offer him the best life there is. Please note that when I say the best life is still bad, I'm doing a comparison with a state of unexistence. Of course, when we say that life A and life B, of course we could compare that, we could say that life B is better than A, and the best life, this is the best life when we compare it with people that are alive, with people that have lives. But when we compare that a person who has the best life with a state of unexistence, by the logic of asymmetry, we are forced to say that the best life in this case is still bad compared to a state of unexistence. Argument number 3. Adaptation and resilience argument. Even people in bad conditions often report contentment due to psychological resilience and meaning making. Of course, people still derive meaning from their suffering, yes. Doesn't mean that their meaning is actually objective. Doesn't mean that their meaning has any meaning or having it bad in life. Of course, our brains drive us to find some transcendent or higher meaning inside of it. It only wants us to survive. It only wants that to keep us alive. Of course, the human psychology is always driven to create meaning out of things. We are pattern-loving creatures. We crave meaning. We crave purpose. Even if we're having it bad, we still want something from it. We still desire something out of it. I can give you an example. I could tell you that I would give you cancer, and you will have such a great meaning out of it. Would you still want to go through the experience? Of course you wouldn't want to. The experience of having cancer is still bad. People, when they are cornered with this bad experience and suffering, their brain trying to keep them alive, trying to promote survival, they give them with this type of meaning, this type of transcending purpose inside of it, this poetic realm of reality. Doesn't mean that what they're going through is actually good. It's bad in itself, and just having a meaning out of it doesn't make it better, because the experience is still objectively painful. And if we could come to you and say, would you want to get rid of this terminal illness, but you would also lose your meaning with it? Of course you would accept, because you, as was as you are, you understand that getting rid of something which is objectively painful gives you pleasure more than keeping something which is fictional, like meaning or purpose. It's a coping mechanism that your evolutionary psychology pushes you to maintain survival. So if we're gonna talk about adaptation, he who does not exist would never be forced to adapt, because there is nothing to adapt for. He who does not exist is at peace, because he does not exist. Figuratively, of course, because if we take it literally, there is a flaw of logic, because he who does not exist cannot have peace. But you know what I'm saying. Argument number 4. Meaning making argument. I think I have already responded to meaning cannot be objective, because if we think that meaning comes from a higher force, we need first of all to prove that higher force. But I don't want to make this video again about religion and the existence of God. Anyway, we need to prove that there is a higher force in order for us to say that our meaning is driven from this source. But until we do that, we do not know. And it's safer to stick with it that way. What are we left with is just figuring out some type of meaning absurdly, following it as long as it gives you pleasure, then change it when that pleasure stops until you die. That's all. Anyhow, if meaning comes from a higher source, it's a command, it's an imperative, it's an order rather than a meaning. Then if we figure it out ourselves and create our own meaning, it only emphasizes the point that that meaning does not really exist, that we needed to imagine one ourselves. In either cases, there is no meaning to life. 5. Comparative suffering argument. Not all lives are actually equal. The best life is actually comparatively good to others. Yes, I have already said that. But my problem is, the best life is still bad when we compare it to a state of never beginning to exist. Of course, we could say that this life is better than this one. But when we compare it to a state of never beginning to exist is definitely better. Number 6. Evolutionary purpose argument. Life is not designed to be good or bad, just adaptive for survival and staying alive. Of course, the good and bad do not exist objectively, but pain and suffering do. The process of natural selection, as much as it includes prosperity for the fit, it includes death and demise for the unfit. If evolution is a fact, suffering is also a fact. Number 7. Religious or spiritual argument. For many religious views, suffering is some form of a test for a higher plan, that it can have redemptive or spiritual value. But still, even if I was religious, I wouldn't want to have a child of my own, because I wouldn't be able to guarantee that my child would be a good believer. I wouldn't be able that my child would be able to keep his commandments and would be able to keep his faith. I wouldn't be able to guarantee my child heaven. The horrors of life lie in uncertainty. You wouldn't be able to know whether your child is gonna enter hell or gonna enter heaven. This is actually such a dangerous bet that I wouldn't be able to make. Number 8, gratitude argument. People who practice gratitude reports higher levels of happiness and satisfaction. Gratitude actually is a coping mechanism. If I could give you what you want, you wouldn't want to feel gratitude about having less. Of course, you know that you couldn't have more, so you decide to practice gratitude. You have no other choice but to do that. Even if you could have what you wanted, but still practice contentment and gratitude of what little you have. Even if you could have more, it's only by a deep understanding that slaving behind material things would only make you worse. So you understand that actually suffering comes from desire, which is actually intrinsic driving creatures. And you are a thinking animal. You have figured it out yourself. That desire brings suffering. Standing on the shoulders of giants, the Buddha, the Stoics, the Cynics, and all those great practitioners of asceticism. But still, by practicing asceticism, we cannot guarantee that our lives would never have some sort of suffering. After that, you would still age, you would still get sick, you would still die, you would still lose loved ones, you would still be able to suffer physically, if not even psychologically, like the fear of missing out. Practicing gratitude and contentment and leading an ascetic way of life actually decreases the amount of suffering, yes, but it doesn't make it vanish completely. Argument number 9. Life includes beauty, love, and meaning. Pain and beauty often coexist. Dismissing life as bad often ignores the depth of that mix. I agree, life actually contains beauty, and it contains a lot of pleasures. Yes, all I'm saying is, all of those pleasures combined together do not amount to the amount of suffering that is in the other side. It's a great price to pay, don't you think? Paying with suffering in order to enjoy those fleeting feelings of pleasure. Nah. Number 10. Existential freedom argument. You are free to give life meaning. Existentialists argue that it's your responsibility to make your own meaning, create value through engagement with life. Yes, I am free to give life meaning, but not like free, as if free will, because it does not exist. But yes, I am free to do that, but I told you, it's just a coping mechanism. We are born, we exist, we are conscious. What is this? This is life. What am I gonna do for the rest of my life? You know what to do? Let's create some type of meaning, just to avoid hanging ourselves. It's a coping mechanism. It doesn't mean that life is inherently good. We are still comparing with that who never began to exist, not with other type of lives. 11. Optimism bias argument. Most humans would want to live and see life as good. On average, people don't really judge life as being a bad. Just because the majority says thus, doesn't mean it's true. It's only by subjecting suffering and pleasure to scrutiny that you figure out that life is inherently bad. The average person is not such a deep critical thinker. The average person doesn't focus on such deep questions. The average person doesn't actually engage himself with questions about existence, about morality, metaphysics, perception, religion, the existence of God. The average person is poor in logic. The average person is not able to handle sophisticated philosophical arguments. So why would we take the average person's opinion into account? Optimism is only a coping mechanism. I'm not telling you to be a pessimist. Of course, live your life to the fullest. We're only here stating what is true. And I care only about what's true. Argument number 12. Progress argument. Modern life is better than ever in terms of health, rights, and opportunities. Yeah, I do agree. Right now, if you have just some type of toothache, you can go to the dentist and take it out. As much as somebody in the distant past who must have had to endure the pain Of course, this is better, but it's never better than never beginning to exist. We are not comparing lives. Here, we are comparing life with a state of never beginning to exist. 13. Parenthood and legacy argument. Parenting and leaving a legacy. Now I have a whole video about parents in my anti-natalism playlist. Parents always have this hidden agenda behind them giving you birth. They want things from you. This is always the case. They give birth to you having some plans. People claim that it has a value and such an intrinsic aesthetic value to it or quality. But it doesn't. It's only pleasure. Parents give birth to their children to fend off loneliness, to be a part in their social plans, in their economic plans, in their political plans. They never actually put regard to all the suffering that exists in the world. They don't care about that. They only care about the pleasures that they would get from you, being born and being present in their family. There is no purpose, there is only a biological drive and a hidden social, political, economical, selfish agenda. That's all there is. We should embrace life's absurdity. This is what makes it valuable. Are you telling me that I should embrace a weak body, needing to eat, needing to drink, needing to go to the bathroom every now and then, needing to sleep, needing to work in order to keep alive? A life that I didn't choose. A body subject to destruction and disease, aging and decaying and dying. A body with persistent natural urges that hinder your creativity and productivity. A body that is conscious about everything. And when I say everything, I include of course the bad, which outweighs the good. A body which understands that it would die someday. Anyway, I don't want to be this hard materialist, pessimist guy on YouTube. Life is thus, and it's good actually to understand. When you understand things, it gives you an existential power. Create your own meaning in life. Create your own pleasures and follow them. Strive to have the best life that you could ever have. Try to avoid as much as you can suffer whenever and wherever it is. Dive deep into constructive pleasure. Rise above your psychological hindrances and enjoy the trip. Thanks again for watching and see you in the next one.